screen. Was I saying it? Yes, sir. Okay, sir. And when it's
This is the original. 7.
This house is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, October 25th, 2022 to be deferred. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honour, the Speaker. Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph. The question is that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
7, in the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Firearms Amendment Bill 2022.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, for several years now, we have experienced in this country an increase in the illegal use of firearms. There's no doubt, sir, that this phenomenon has concerned every single Barbadian in the gravest possible of terms, whether they have been affected by it or not. The fact is, sir, that crime and firearm crimes, perhaps more than any other, have a ripple effect on our society because it isn't just the person who may have been injured or the person who may have lost his or her life whom is affected. Naturally, there's the deleterious effect, the damaging effect on relatives and friends. There's the damaging effect in the community from which these individuals would come. But then, Mr. Speaker, there's also the effect on the wider Barbadian society. And Mr. Speaker, I have said on several occasions now, and I reiterate, that Barbados is still a safe society. It is a safe place for us to live and work. It is a safe place for us to raise our families. We've worked hard, sir, to make it safe and to keep it safe. But notwithstanding that, and I believe it is a fact, so I will say notwithstanding that fact, the presence of a firearm crime, the existence of a firearm crime can have an effect on all the rest of us, sir, because, and we've seen it here, we've seen where a gunman 2 or 3 years ago went into Sheraton Mall and killed another person. We've seen it where people go into communities and start shooting wild. We had an incident only last week where there was a drive-by shooting in a St. Michael community, 3 people injured. A few months ago, we had a situation where after a cruise, several people were injured by indiscriminate and wanton shooting. So, sir, there's the risk to the other people for whom there may have been no intention. But let me put it another way. Person A goes to shoot person B. But along the way, sir, person C, D, E, and F, there's a good chance that they, bystanders, innocent bystanders, might also be shot. You know, Mr. Speaker, there was a time decades ago then in Barbados, I think there was there were some people, one taxi man I believe had been killed, it might even have been 2. And at that point, sir, Barbadians stopped patronizing places at night. That's right, in that hole. Because the taxi men felt that they were at risk. So they stopped working late at night. And when they did work, they refused to do the long trips. So, you know, sir, they weren't coming to St. Joseph. And as a result of that, sir, it had a damaging effect on the nightlife of Barbados because people were going out at night but found that they couldn't get a taxi home. So no point laughing. So I'm using that, Mr. Speaker, to illustrate that the existence of a particular kind of crime is often going to have effects far beyond what you would ordinarily contemplate, sir. Now, I am happy, Mr. Speaker, that Barbadians are still going out at night. They are still celebrating life, especially life after the restrictions of COVID. And we want that for them. Mr. Speaker, as a parliament and as a government, it is our solemn and sworn duty to do all within our power to protect the safety, the lives, the livelihoods of Barbadians and the sanctity of our communities. It is our duty. That is what we are here for. And so as a parliament, Mr. Speaker, we are called on today to consider amendments to the Firearms Act. Now, there's been a lot of talk about crime generally. There's been a lot of talk about firearms. But let us rewind a little bit and put this in context, Mr. Speaker. Housewives or teachers, The average person in our society does not have any firearm in their possession. We have a regime, Mr. Speaker, of legal firearms, people applying for firearms to carry, to protect themselves. That is what our regime does now. Any firearm that is in a person's possession that is not licensed is an illegal firearm. The average Barbadian, sir, doesn't deal in illegal firearms. Illegal firearms is a characteristic of a criminal element in our society. And those illegal firearms, Mr. Speaker, are part of a larger criminal enterprise. That larger criminal enterprise is often associated with the trade in illegal drugs. But the fact of the matter is that the criminal element in Barbados has expanded beyond that. But firearms are one of their tools in trade. Mr. Speaker, I have made it a point of asking on every occasion when there's a shooting for some information on the victim. And almost in every instance, the victim is somebody who is known to the law courts or known to the police for serious criminal matters. Now, that is not an attorney general, that's not a Dale Marshall thing. From time immemorial, in the study of crime, they do, I think the term they call is victim typology. In other words, they want to see whether identifying the victim or whether there are any characteristics about the victim that will help to paint a picture which can in turn help to solve the crime. It is a startling fact, as I said, that in almost every instance, the individual is already well known to the courts, well known to the police as being involved in crime. And in instances where they have not yet had charges brought against them, they're individuals who have already found themselves under the watchful eye of the police service. Mr. Speaker, they are almost always male, the victims. They are almost always young. If you look at the number, at our recent firearm-related homicides, for the most part, there were young men in their 20s. Last weekend, a young man aged 25. They're almost always young, almost always male. And that should tell us, Mr. Speaker, that we, while we are not in any way in a crisis, we have a problem with our young men finding themselves into criminal activity. And at the outset, I want to welcome our latest minister, the Minister of State in the Office of the Attorney General, who will have responsibility for crime prevention. Traditionally, when people think about crime prevention, Mr. Speaker, they tend to think about the police force, about the police service. Because in their mind, the police service is not just about law enforcement. In their mind, the police service has the responsibility of preventing crimes from happening. That, Mr. Speaker, is a very narrow and simplistic view, not just of the work of the police force, but also on how our society functions. You see, Mr. Speaker, when a police officer is sent to train at the police training school, they're not trained in how to prevent crimes in Barbados. They're trained in investigative techniques. They're trained in use of firearms. They're trained how to respond to certain things. And yes, they do some elements of sociology and criminology and so on, but when they go on the beat every single day, if they see a crime happening, yes, of course, their job is to prevent it from happening. And if they get a call from the public saying something is likely to go down or we are seeing something, yes, they have a duty to come, get involved, and try to prevent the crime from happening, sir. But the police service only has a very limited role in crime prevention. And I'm not going to steal the new minister's thunder. I have a feeling that he wants to say some very important words this morning. I will leave that to him. But the point I'm making is, sir, that when we recognize that our young men, the shooters, the murderers, and the victims are all young men, then we have to ask ourselves, what are those things that we can do which have nothing at all to do with the police service to keep our young men out of crime? Now, Mr. Speaker, I noticed on the back page of a paper of The Nation, I think it was recently, somebody saying that it can't just be about charging people and locking them up. Obviously, the person who said that had just awakened to that fact. Obviously, they have had no knowledge of the history of law enforcement and the history of social work and all of those other things in our society. When we came to government, Mr. Speaker, in 2018, the situation in relation to crime was already out of hand. Who among us, who among you, did not wake up in fright when you heard about the gunplay and the shooting down Spring Garden one Kadooment Day? Something that had never been heard of in our country. And for a decade, we saw this happening. We saw it happening, Mr. Speaker. There were incidents where individuals walked into communities in broad daylight and shot down people, left bodies lying bloody on the streets. But there are some who want to point at this administration as if to suggest that we are somehow failing in our duty to protect the citizens of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, let's put it this way. It is sometimes harder to turn things around than to get it started. You know, they say that a ship, Mr. Speaker, it takes about 5 miles before it can get to stop because of its size. It has a momentum, and you can try to stop it all you like, but it will never stop right away. What about your car, sir? You're driving down the road, something happened, you got to press brakes, but your vehicle is not going to stop immediately. It takes time. You've applied the brake, you've applied the pressure of the brake, but it's going to take time before your vehicle comes to a halt. Deceleration. And Mr. Speaker, we, long before we came to government, long before we came to government, recognized, sir, that the criminal element in Barbados had become emboldened, and we were visited with shootings in broad daylight. And we said then, and I will remember it, we were ignored. But as the spokesperson on law and order, I said then to the last administration, this is not about you. This is not about a DLP government. We have a problem in Barbados. Let us sit down, let us reason, let's talk about it. I remember it well. Crime does not see political stripes or colors. I don't think there's a criminal anywhere in Barbados who makes a determination on who he is going to shoot, rob, rape, kill, whatever, based on whether they are BLP or NDP. I've never heard of a criminal who will turn aside from somebody because they see a picture of Al Barra or Tom Adams hang up in the house. Crime does not respect political affiliation. And I remember being in the opposition office and speaking to the press and saying, let us sit down together. This is a problem that the country is having. Don't feel that the Democratic Labour Party has all the solutions and can do it themselves. Mr. Speaker, that entreaty was ignored. That entreaty was ignored. We came to government having published a document called the Covenant of Hope 2 years earlier. And in our Covenant of Hope, we said to the people of Barbados, this is what the Barbados Labour Party stands for. We hadn't won the government yet. But seeing what was happening in our country at the time, we understood the significance, we understood the importance of grappling with crime. And in our Covenant of Hope, sir, and I believe it's a document of the House, we said that the first call on our national resources would be for law, order, and citizen safety. Mr. Speaker, we did not wait until a manifesto came to say that. We did not wait until we won an election to say that. We did not wait until we were being put through the fires to say that. We said it long before we came to government, Mr. Speaker, because we understood even then, we weren't in power, but we understood that we were going to have some monumental issues ahead of us, and we needed to determine what our direction would be. Mr. Speaker, I believe that if you threw it out to Barbadians, some would say the first call on national resources should be health. Some will say the first call on national resources should be education. If we cast it out to Barbadians, we would never come up with the same answers. Do you know what an act of bravery it is for an administration in waiting to determine long before we come to government, here's an issue, and we're willing to commit as our first call on national resources, law and order and citizen safety. And when we came to government, Mr. Speaker, you know, there are some who simplistically want to say, oh, well, since the Barbados Labour Party came to government, we had more murders. Statistically, of course we did. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? The persons committing those murders, 10 and 15 years before, Mr. Speaker, they were in Sunday school. 10 and 15 years before, they were in our secondary schools. 10 and 15 years before, they were on our school buses. 10 and 15 years before, sir, they were walking through town unruly. But perhaps nobody felt that it was important to engage in a little crime prevention then. And so we watch these individuals develop particular attitudes towards authority. They didn't wake up one morning and get a gun and go and shoot somebody. They were involved in criminal activity for a number of years. And as a society, we were all failed by the last administration because they chose to do nothing. I'm not going to talk about the last administration in this debate. I've said enough about them. I'm going to talk about what we did. When we came to government, sir, in 2018, we found a difficult situation. We were determined that we would deal with it. And one of the first things we did, in fact, it was the first time in our history, Mr. Speaker, that a national security briefing was extended to anybody outside of the National Security Council. Perhaps most Barbadians don't know that we have such a thing, but we do. And we are briefed frequently on what's happening in our country. And recognizing that we had a serious issue to grapple with, for the first time, Mr. Speaker, the national security briefing was extended to parliamentarians. For the first time in our history, sir, the briefing was extended to members of the civil society. And when I say parliamentarians, I include the opposition, sir. The last administration never briefed us on nothing. But we briefed the last, when we were in 2018, we briefed the opposition senators, because we recognized that we needed to hold hands and get this job done. We briefed our business community. We briefed all of our senior civil servants. Because, Mr. Speaker, it was important that as a country, we needed to devote our resources, we needed to devote our energies, every single one of us, not just the cabinet, not just the Attorney General, everybody had to pull weight. And Mr. Speaker, we've put a lot of social programs in place. I'm not going to steal your thunder, sir. Leave you to talk about those things. But we started it in 2018. We made sure that some community centers that were derelict and shut down, instructions were given, make sure and get them open back again. A variety of things were done because we understood that in order to steer our young men and women away from the apparent attractiveness of criminal lives, we needed to show them something else. And we did it. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we have been able to see reductions in the number of homicides. We've been able to see reductions in the level of crime overall. But let me remind the society of what we came to government and found. Not a working scanner at the port, sir. Not a working scanner at the port. It had not worked, sir, for 18 months. So thousands of containers coming through our port with weapons and drugs in them, and we did not have the technological capacity to stop these things. So, you weren't getting much luck with seizures of firearms at the port. We spent, I think it was about $20 million on a high-tech scanner. And that has started to pay dividends. But we've also been seizing a large number of firearms through various police operations. But let's understand this, Mr. Speaker. There was a period when firearms were coming in without much of a challenge. They were brought in. We believe they were stockpiled and available for use. But almost every day, sir, the Barbados Police Service has been seizing firearms, and I'm proud to say, sir, that we have been seizing firearms at a far higher rate than ever before. In fact, if you look over the last few years, I gave those statistics publicly recently, you would see that the number of firearms being seized by the police service was increasing on an annual basis. I believe now, sir, that the number is well over 100. And I don't think that has anything to do with the 30-something that we found last week. So we are making a dent, sir, in the number of firearms that are available, that are on the streets for people to do this kind of criminal activity. But, Mr. Speaker, don't let's fool ourselves. You think we got all? We didn't get all. We've not got all. So that is a job in progress that we have to tackle day in, day out, to continue to reduce the numbers of firearms available for illegal activity. But let's get this straight. The more efforts we put into it, it seems as though there are things happening overseas that present problems for us. If you consider the remarkable ease with which you can get a gun in the United States, our guns, the guns that make their way into Barbados illegally, are overwhelmingly out of the United States. In New York, earlier this year, there was a case brought against the state government because they had passed a law which said you will only be able to get a firearm if you can prove that you are at risk. In other words, we will let you get a firearm if you can prove that your safety is at stake. It was thrown out by the New York Supreme Court. They said, what are you talking about? You have the right to bear arms. And so we had a situation recently reported in the press, happily now those firearms made their way into Barbados, where 2 Barbadian young men living in the United States could go and buy 30-something firearms, 45 it was, to ship to Barbados. It is as easy as anything. So that is what is happening over there. So when it is easy for individuals to get guns cheap over there, then that's what they're doing and sending them here. And we're doing a remarkable job of arresting them, but Mr. Speaker, in that regard too, we don't get all. So this is an issue that we recognize has to be tackled from many fronts. We have to tackle the overall issue of crime. What are the drivers of crime? Now, Mr. Speaker, anybody would tell you, in fact, I know, how to put it now, I guess for the first time in our history, smiling is a bad thing. I don't mind the name Guy Smiley. I always learned as a child that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. And when you got your face set up, one won't even come near you. So, not having many physical attributes, I started to smile from early. And I continue to. I make no apologies for it. But, Mr. Speaker, as I was researching something some time ago, I realized that the former Attorney General said in a speech, why are you all not looking at the parents of these children? And I said, well, if he could say it, well, I could say it too. On a serious note, every day somebody is calling for the head of the Attorney General. They got my poor mother perplexed because she really feels that somebody over here want to chop off my head. She called me in a panic one day. But Mr. Speaker, whoever wears the hat of Attorney General has a duty to perform. I felt when we were in opposition that the last person in the seat was not doing his job. I felt he was not communicating with the public. I felt that he was not communicating with the opposition. I felt that when they had the shooting on Spring Garden, He should have been able to find him on his cell phone at the same time. I had all those things. Okay? I judge him and his performance objectively. But Mr. Speaker, the time, as hard as it may seem, has come when we need to ask ourselves, when a young man at age 25 or 30, let me sit with 25, goes through a revolving door of prison, committed his first murder at 18, goes into prison, gets bail, comes out, shoots somebody else, go up again, get bail, comes out, shoots somebody else. And every man, Jack, wants to blame the system. So they blame the judges for gaining bail. They're blaming the Attorney General for general purposes. They blame prison because prison did not succeed in rehabilitating the offender. And then they blame the Attorney General again because you got to get back around real fast. Who blames the parent of a child who at 18 years old, having just left school, picks up a gun and shoots somebody? This is not about, I'm not here to castigate anybody, sir. I know what the headline will say tomorrow. But, sir, let us accept that when we sit in our homes and we feel that our only role is to apportion blame, when we feel that our only role is to identify this cause and that cause and that cause, without looking at some of the early causes, when we do that, sir, we are fooling ourselves. We're fooling ourselves. I got a call from a teacher who said to me that one of his students, well, he told me, deal with it as an education matter. One of his students had not come to school. And apparently that student had not been home the night before. And in his words, it appeared as though the parents were not particularly concerned. Now, Mr. Speaker, my son is 22. He went to a fete the other night. I tell you, son, the fete done at 1, I want you home by 1:05. He showed up at 2:30. I couldn't sleep. But we have situations in Barbados where people don't seem to understand that the directions that our young people go, the misdirection, the wrong road, it don't start when they're 25. It often starts when they're 10 and 11. And the former Minister of Education will tell you that she knows of instances where 11-year-olds at our primary schools come in school with weapons, and you want to blame the Minister of Education. Where did they get the weapon from? Where did it come from that morning? As a little boy, my mother used to give me a little pat down. It wasn't regular, because I was really a decent young man. Every now and again, she used to just give me a little pat down. And sir, this was in the 60s and the 70s. She was patting me down. I just thought it was an act of love. I didn't know she was looking to see if I had anything in my pocket that I should have. How many parents are doing these things, sir? I'm here to talk about the firm amendment, but I think it was important, sir, to set the context, all right? We all have skin in this game. All. Because while our society is safe, in the twinkling of an eye, it can become unsafe. Let's get that clear. And while the guns, we may associate them with particular communities in Barbados, the furthest distance in Barbados is half hour by bus. So none of us are out of reach. None of us are out of reach. So this calls for all of us to put our shoulder to the wheel. We have to save vulnerable families, not because we feel that we should be a society that everybody gets things free. But the fact is, sir, that there are some families that if you don't reach out the hand of the state to save them, well, the immediate effect may appear to be poverty. The long-term effect is going to be that they will not be able to properly care for, mentor, and nurture their children. And what may well happen is that those youngsters are going to end up gravitating to somebody else. So let us stop it. Let us stop it. Let us recognize that we have a government. We are going to do our best. Sir, the police service is perhaps the one agency of government other than the hospital that has been receiving an increase in its budget every year. The police service in its last, when people were getting their estimates cut, the police service theirs was either maintained or increased. Now, the point is, sir, that there are state responses, but there are also individual responses. And if nothing else, sir, let us agree that the time has come when we need to look at the individual responses a little bit more. We can point our fingers, but you know what they say, you point one at me and the other three pointing back at you. So let us ask ourselves, is there a young man or a young woman in our community that perhaps I was a little harsh with? You know, I remember recently being someplace and an older gentleman said to a little boy, "Move from here, you musty boy." And you know, growing up I used to hear that kind of thing often, but now we're dealing with a different kind of individual. And why be harsh when perhaps we should be mentoring? What is that child going to feel? Perhaps the adult who spoke to that boy in that harsh manner could have adopted a different stance. But I am not here to lecture people on that, sir. Let's talk about the firearm reform. Now, Mr. Speaker, as a lawyer, you well know that the purpose of criminal penalties is multifaceted. But the deterrent effect of it is the one that we focus on for the most. And it is felt, sir, that once more we need to look at the Firearms Act and increase the penalties that individuals involved in committing firearms can receive when they face the courts. Now, Mr. Speaker, our Firearms Act is not that old. It came into force in the 1990s. And one of the features of that Firearms Act, as it was then, was the imposition of something called mandatory penalties. Barbadians are accustomed saying, "Man, you want locking up. They should have given 10 years." Normally, in fact, let me put it another way. Our normal reaction is to work out in our heads what a judge should do. And there have been times in the past, Mr. Speaker, when Parliament has succumbed to that attitude too and determined in advance what a judge should do. Example number one, any person found guilty of murder shall be sentenced to death. That is Parliament determining what a judge should do. But the law has now evolved to the point where we say and recognize that as a part of the separation of powers doctrine, Parliament should stick to what Parliament is good at and leave judges who hear the case to make a decision about what penalty should be imposed. So our courts have now moved away from accepting the concept of a mandatory penalty. So when Barbadians were saying, "Man, when we remove the death penalty, we haven't removed the death penalty, we just removed the mandatory nature of the death penalty. So the judge decides if you will be put to death or not. That is the law. And so in our Firearms Act, sir, there were mandatory sentences. A person found guilty of a particular offense shall be sentenced to this. But following the same separation of powers doctrine, that too got struck down. No, sir, that is the law. But, Mr. Speaker, we've long considered this, and we've looked at the law in other jurisdictions. And because of the peculiar nature of firearm offenses, the damage to the society, the importance of treating to firearm offenses by our society, we asked the Law Reform Commission to consider the Firearms Act, consider the situation where mandatory penalties have been struck down, and make recommendations to us as to how we should proceed to deal with the Firearms Act. And I want to thank the Law Reform Committee, Mr. Speaker. They've been doing a tremendous amount of work. We've always approached the matter of amending our laws in an ad hoc way. When we established the Law Reform Committee, I don't think that we imagined that they would be so successful. But they've done a remarkable job looking at how we can reform and modernize a large number of our piece of legislation, and they took this one on as a special purpose. And Mr. Speaker, they considered the law not just in Barbados, but the wider Caribbean. They considered the law in the UK and the UK territories. And Mr. Speaker, they have come back to us, having considered the jurisprudence, having considered how the courts ruled, and they have said to us that we can approach the matter of mandatory penalties in a different way. And it has found jurisprudential support, and judges have accepted that it is a legitimate way to do it without breaching the doctrine of separation of powers. And that approach, Mr. Speaker, is one that we've adopted here. And we say in this particular bill that a person who's been found guilty of an offense, of a firearm offense, shall, on conviction on indictment, in the case of a first offense, be sentenced to imprisonment for not less than 10 years and not more than 20. In the case of a second or subsequent offense, be sentenced to imprisonment for life, sir, or a lesser term not being 20 years. But there's an exception, Mr. Speaker, and that exception says this, essentially, that while we set out what we consider to be a fairly strict regime, we do give the judge a particular discretion in certain instances. And these instances are as follows. The judge can impose imprisonment of a lesser term if the person who committed the offense was under the age of 18 at the time of the commission of the offense. If the person who committed the offense has not been previously convicted of an indictable offense of a violent nature. If public safety and public order will not be prejudiced. And if the court is of the opinion that there are other exceptional circumstances relating to the offense or to the person convicted of the offense which justify its not doing so. So what we have, Mr. Speaker, is a hybrid approach. Let's recap. A mandatory minimum penalty does not work. It will not stand up in law. It has been struck down in Barbados already. But a mandatory minimum penalty could work if you give the judge an opportunity in certain circumstances to deviate from it. And this has stood the test of lawfulness in other jurisdictions at the highest courts. So, when a person is faced with a charge of a firearm offense and is convicted, if it is first offense, he can get between 10 and 20 years. If it's a subsequent offense, Mr. Speaker, he can get as high as life imprisonment. And I want the public and I want the criminals to reflect on this. People are saying, y'all soft? No, sir, we're not soft anymore. We never were soft. But the point is, we're saying now that our level of tolerance for the criminal and his foolishness has now vanished to the point where we are prepared to say that you can be subject to a sentence of life imprisonment on a second firearm offense, sir. So an individual who, for some reason, may find himself getting off on a murder charge with a firearm offense. He may find himself getting off of a murder charge. We can't predict how a jury will rule. Okay? So he may get off of murder. But he could find himself, if this is a second offense, staring a life sentence in the face because he could be convicted of the firearm offense. So you may get away, you may get off a murder charge on a technicality, all kind of thing. The jury may not believe that it was murder. But if you do it with a firearm and it was a second firearm offense, you can find yourself staring a life penalty, a life sentence in the face, much as if you were convicted of murder but didn't receive capital punishment. Now, Mr. Speaker, I do not know how much harsher a law could be established than this, but it still gives the court the discretion in special circumstances to deviate from it. Now, we hope that this will send a signal to the criminal element. Those fellows who want to walk around with guns and so on, we hope they understand they cannot defeat the state. There may be 100 or 200 of them, but there are 300,000 of us. And we will do whatever is necessary to protect the 300,000 of us against the 100, 150, or 200 of you. And this, Mr. Speaker, is one of those steps. But I also want to draw your attention to another part of this, because we now have provision in this bill which provides for a sentence to be served consecutively. And it says this, sir: notwithstanding any law to the contrary, a sentence of imprisonment imposed on a person convicted of an indictable offense under this act shall be served consecutively to any other sentence of imprisonment imposed for an offense arising out of the same event or a series of events. So the bottom line is, sir, if you find yourself convicted of more than one offense under this act, we're not saying you're going to prison for this term. We're saying you're serving 2 terms, one after the next. Understand me clearly, sir. Well, I know you understand me clearly. I'm speaking to those who might not. Okay? Because normally you get sent, you're found guilty of a dozen things, and the court looks at the overall circumstances and so on, and then they say, well, for this you get 3 years, for that you get 6 years, for the next thing you get that, but you end up only serving the longest of the time. Not so anymore with firearm offenses, Mr. Speaker. We adding the 2 together. You are man enough to commit 2 offenses, will feel 2 sets of punishment. Consecutive, sir. Now, do we want our young men to feel this? Or are we going to do whatever we can to save them from this? We're prepared, Mr. Speaker, to do whatever we can to save them from this, but we are going to save our society first. So the criminal element, be warned. If this is the road you persist in going down, then you will find yourselves not before a smiling judge. You will find yourselves before a judge who has the strong powers of sentencing that are required to send a message. So it's not just about punishing the individual, it has to be about sending a message to people who may feel that they can do this and get away with it. The other matter that I will just point out to the chamber, but I'm not going to spend any lot of time on it, sir, is that we've taken the opportunity to make an amendment to the Juries Act. You know, sir, things happen for a long time and you know, nobody bothers to change them, but this is one so that we feel we need to change. Let me explain it in simple terms. A person who is charged with a murder must be tried by a jury of 12 people. Okay? But what happens if he uses a firearm and kills somebody? He isn't generally charged with a firearm offense. Because under the law as it stands, a firearm offense requires a jury of 9 people. So you have the oddity, sir, of a person taking a gun, shooting John Brown, in order to be tried for the murder, 12 people. In order to be tried for using the firearm, 9 people. So it essentially puts the state to the trouble of doing 2 trials. And sometimes a person again may get off of the murder charge, but the evidence that they use a firearm is incontrovertible. Happens. So we feel that rather than putting the state now to do a new trial, we are saying a jury of 12 people could still make a determination on a firearm offense in a capital case, sir. We think it is practical, it is sensible, and something that we should have done a long time ago. Now, there are some other things that we've done in this bill, sir, but I will ask my colleague to have in his speech, if he does speak, to discuss them. We've had some challenges, sir, with our licensing regime, and people who are into sport shooting and hunting get caught up in a system that was not intended for them. And rather than coming back to Parliament and doing it at a later date, I felt that we would make the job of the police service a lot easier, and we would also make the people who are interested in having a firearm for shooting on the range, for competition shooting and so on. And Barbados has done very well in that over the years. And the Olympic status, and we feel that now is the time to deal with that, sir. Just a few more things that I want to cover off. Our criminal justice system has benefited, Mr. Speaker, from an increase in the number of criminal judges when we came to government in 2018, sir. In 2018, we came to government, you had a huge backlog of cases and only 2 judges, only 2 criminal judges. And those criminal judges, Mr. Speaker, you well recollect, used to rotate. So this year, they're doing civil, and then all of a sudden you hear, well, you're doing the criminal matters next year. And, you know, it was not the best that we could do. So we said, look, we're going to firmly establish divisions so that if you're in the criminal division, you're in the criminal division for a while. It gives you predictability. If you start a case, you finish it. And you also get to hone your skills on a judge on the criminal law. Criminal law is extremely complex, Mr. Speaker. Very complex. And the nature of a criminal trial is that you don't get to go away and study 200 cases for 9 months, 2 years to give a decision. You got to come back and give a decision in a matter of weeks. So it was important for us to establish a criminal division so that the judges get to, they're immersed in criminal matters. They get to the things that a person not versed in it got to try and work out. He or she does it every day, so they know it. And in addition to that, sir, we increased the number of judges on the criminal bench. That criminal bench, sir, did an extraordinary job in 2020 and 2021. I want to laud them for it, sir. In each of those years, they managed to dispose of over 200 criminal cases. So it has begun to work. But, Mr. Speaker, I asked for the statistics on murder trials and how many murder trials were awaiting being heard in the courts. And I asked for the statistics of how many firearm matters were awaiting trial in the court, sir. And I want to give you those exact numbers as of December. Mr. Speaker, the number as of December, just bear with me one moment, sir. The numbers as of September, having a little trouble finding it, so it was, I think it was about 96 or 98. So you had a number in excess of 90 awaiting trial as of September for murder. You had 8 awaiting trial for manslaughter, and you had 280 something for firearm offenses. And I will undertake, I don't want the chamber to have the inaccurate numbers, so I will undertake to give it before I wrap up my speech in a few minutes. Now, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine having 90-something murder trials that are to be done in Little Barbados. 90-something people waiting to be tried for murder cases in Little Barbados. And the phenomenon of people applying for bail has become firmly entrenched. No, the phenomenon of people applying for bail who are murder charges has become firmly entrenched. Because an individual, where you got 90-something people awaiting trials for murder, whether we like it or not, there are certain legal principles that our society is governed by. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. That's one. Okay? Now, for a long time, if you were charged with murder, you couldn't get a bail. And Mr. Speaker, we liked it so. That was how we liked it. But ask ourselves the question, and I'm not giving a position on it. I can only tell you that the law of Barbados allows a judge, in appropriate circumstances, to grant bail to a person charged with murder. Plain and simple. That is the law. Not Dale Marshall law, the Barbados law. And judges, in appropriate cases, have been doing exactly that. But when you hear that there are 90-something people awaiting trials for murder, some of them going back almost 20 years, you begin to ask yourself, what's happening in our society? What's happening with the judicial system? Why do we have so many trials for murder? Incomplete, unstarted. I believe in justice. And the Prime Minister put it very well when she said, if you get convicted, you get convicted. If you get off, you get off. But your trial must be done. And it must be done in good time. And the next phenomenon that has visited itself on us now is that lawyers are now coming to court, bringing cases against the government, seeking damages because we took too long to try the cases. Now, our Constitution guarantees trial within a reasonable time for criminal offenses. So they're not wrong either. We have certain legal principles by which we must either stand or fall. But the principles are the principles. Now, when you have 90-something cases for murder waiting to start, somebody in that group is going to apply for bail and they're going to get it. Somebody in that group is going to apply for damages for breach of their constitutional rights and they're going to get that too. Plain and simple. Those are the rules. I can't change them. So, what is to be our response as the state? Our response as the state has to be to make sure that our judicial system, the course of criminal trials, the nature of our prosecutions and all those things are put right. That's what we have to do as a state. We have to put that situation right. I have a relative, sir, who was charged for murder. And I think, if I recall correctly, that it took about 8 years before his case came on. 8 years. I think it ended up as a manslaughter matter. But the point I'm making is that every single one of these people, and I have the correct numbers for you now, sir, as at September 2022, there were 96 murder cases awaiting trial, 8 manslaughter, and 292 firearm cases. Those were the statistics as at last month. 96 murder cases, 8 manslaughter cases, and 292 firearm cases. So no wonder we have a situation where the criminal element feel that, they can do what they like because punishment is not swift, it's not coming soon. And maybe they're hoping that by the time the case come on, the witnesses' memory fades, somebody dead, somebody gone away, case gotta get thrown out. So we want to put this right, Mr. Speaker, and that's why the Prime Minister has agreed to give us 3 more High Court judges for the criminal division. Now, let me tell you what that means. Let me tell you what that means, sir. A total of 8 judges. We have a backlog now of about 1,000 criminal matters waiting to be tried in what we used to call the assizes, tried on indictment. And I told you that the 5 judges that we had in 2020, they got rid of 200 of them. Well, the number is now 1,000, so it was more. So in 2020, they got rid of 200 at a time when with COVID, you couldn't do no jury trials. At a time when you couldn't do face-to-face trials. And in 2021, similarly affected, they got rid of another 200 criminal matters. I am satisfied, sir, that with 8 judges doing nothing but criminal matters, morning, noon, and night, we will be able to put this situation right. You see these 96 people that are waiting trial for murder? We can dispose of that, I am sure, within a year or 2. And the 292 people that are waiting trial for firearm offenses, we can get rid of those too. What does that mean, sir? People will begin to understand that the justice system is taking these criminal matters seriously. How could we say that we are dispensing justice if an individual's family member is shot down, dead, or maybe not dead, and 12, 15 years later the case is not finished? Mr. Speaker, 80% of these cases, this backlog, 80% of this came before 2018. So for those who want to point fingers, point them where they belong. Because when this 80% was happening, they only had 2 judges. The numbers of prosecutors were not increased, nothing so. We have increased the number of prosecutors. We increased the number of judges and are increasing it again. Let somebody tell me that we are not serious about wrestling crime to the ground. It will take time. It will take time, sir. But we are satisfied that with the effort and the resources that we are putting in to deal with the criminal justice system, that it will reap dividends for Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I believe that I can shut up now and let other members participate in this debate. I want Barbadians to be confident about our future. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, because, and I've never been one to say, this is what's happening in Trinidad, or this is what's happening in Jamaica, or this is happening elsewhere, because that gives you a false picture. Our populations are different. So comparing crime in Barbados to crime in Jamaica and Trinidad is a fool's errand. Different kinds of societies. But you know what's peculiar, Mr. Speaker? That in Little St. Lucia, with a population that is smaller than ours by 1/3, the number, they ended last year with 60-something murders. We ended with 30-something. When we were at 29 this year, St. Lucia was hustling for 50. And this phenomenon, Mr. Speaker, is being repeated all across the OECS. So what is happening, sir, is that in the smaller Caribbean states, we are seeing a criminal element emerging that has no regard for life. When we recognize, sir, therefore, that this is not a Barbados phenomenon, we deal with it here. It is our job to deal with it here. Okay? But I believe that sociologists and other people who study these things look for trends in similar societies. And so, Mr. Speaker, the CARICOM governments have taken on board a suggestion made by Prime Minister Rowley of Trinidad that as a region, we need to start dealing with the issue of violence in our societies as if it were a public health problem. And it might be difficult to grasp it so quickly. But, sir, the region dealt with COVID as a public health problem. And we relied on each other's resources to help to get us through it. And so Prime Minister Rowley's recommendation that we look at the issue of violence, criminal violence in our society as a public health problem is one, sir, that the region is going to follow upon, and very soon we'll have our first conference. This is not affecting Barbados alone. The illegal movement of guns is coming to everybody. The use of those guns is being seen in every society in the region, including those that are smaller than us. And so we have to ask ourselves why. And we also know, Mr. Speaker, we also know, sir, that the nature of today's criminal activity is cross-border. It's cross-border. And that's why we have to be mindful of who is moving from here to there and from there to here. Because we know what is happening in the criminal element between Barbados and Trinidad and Barbados and Jamaica and Barbados and St. Lucia, Grenada. And listen, don't fool yourselves. You think it's only the legitimate businessmen that move up and down the region? No, it isn't. The criminal element are forming alliances all across the region. And that's, in our view, on preliminary assessment, that's one of the reasons why you're seeing this increase in the similar kind of criminal activity across every jurisdiction. But we can't wait on them, sir. I am satisfied that this regime that we are putting in place and this regime that I'm asking the Senate to support is one that will send a clear message to the criminal element in Barbados that their wanton disregard for life will not be tolerated. And by giving judges a more powerful tool, and there are going to be other amendments coming, we're going to be bringing some other amendments to strengthen the hands of the judge and also to make the course of criminal trials easier. You are welcome to Mr. Speaker. This is the beginning. And adding to these things is the increase in the number of judges. We have been conscientiously defending the right of every Barbadian to live free, unmolested, and happy in our homeland. And we will strain every sinew, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that the sanctity of our communities is guaranteed and preserved. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you for your patience.
Honourable member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. For some reason, I feel a need to speak on this bill. I don't know what it is, but I feel a need and an urge and desire to speak on this bill, the Firearms Amendment Bill 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, from the outset, I want to thank the constituents of the City of Bridgetown for giving me the opportunity to be here to make the contribution that I am making and the contribution I plan to make in this honourable chamber and in this country. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, I want to thank the Honourable Prime Minister for disposing her confidence in me in a way under a new responsibility to be able to work with this team and this House to make Barbados a better place for all. I want to continue by thanking my colleagues in here for their support of me thus far and expect it even further. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to give special mention to all those Barbadians who've not only reached out to give congratulations, but who have reached out to ask to put their hands to the plow. The retired teachers, the retired and active policemen, prison officers, and ordinary Barbadians in this country. There is something that tickles the mind, sir, and that is the fact that the Attorney General spoke about 100 or 200 people out there causing mischief in the society. And even in the school system, we talk about the 100 or 200 people giving trouble in the educational sector in this country, sir. And what I am mindful of is that it feels as though the other 286,200 have reached out to me to assist in this plight, which means that Barbados and Barbadians are with us on this fight, sir. I am humbled by that. It means that we are truly in this together. So, Mr. Speaker, as I hear the talk up and down the country, on the airwaves, and even in the barbershops, I understand that Barbadians know that we are in this together. The question is, are we building a hut or are we building a nation? Mr. Speaker, sir, if I go to the amendment Bill 2022, the Attorney General put it well, and I just want to summarize and even translate for those who feel that they didn't understand what is going on. The amendment that we are discussing today, sir, is about putting more effective and efficient sentencing provisions in place to ensure that the criminal element is dealt with. It is making sure that we are putting more effective and efficient penalties in place to deter members of the criminal element to understand that the tolerance has run out. The Kraken will be released. It is also putting provisions in place for sporting firearms to ensure that we do not need to increase the need or the desire of citizens, for instance, who want to be involved in shooting sports, that we have to give them the hold, carry, and use license, that those who specifically want to do shooting sports can do so without having to hold, carry, and use license, have them in order to carry. And that is important, sir. It is extremely, extremely important. What is more important is that the society continues to understand that the fight against crime cannot be won by a government approach. It has to be won by a governance approach. And the difference is, in a governance approach, that when we hear of a shooting, sir, no longer do we say, where is the Attorney General? And I hope that they don't say, where is Corey Lane? Mr. Speaker, sir, we need to ask, where are the teachers? Where are the parents? Where is the society? Where is the church? That is where I am hoping that our mindset, where this approach is concerned. When we look at the Act and what the Act plans to do, we must look at all the things collectively that has gone before, and understand that there are short, medium, and long-term mechanisms that we have to put in place in order to treat to not only just the prevention of crime, but to the root causes, the empowerment of people. To reduce the desire, the need, the appetite for crime, we have to ensure that there is something to fill that void. Where do I go as a person? How do I see myself when I look in the mirror? Sir, I've been doing a lot of reading recently in this area. I lean on my 24 years of experience, sir. But even more so, I'm leaning on many persons' experience, many years of experience by doing my reading. And my reading is telling me, sir, that generally what a society needs, what a society desires is civility, fairness and justice, a peaceful society. We have to return to caring communities and supportive families. I have looked at all of the sociological studies of Barbados from 2005 back to the 70s. And all of them are telling me the same thing. What we are seeing now are fruits of a destructive tree, bearing fruit in this time. Not only the chickens, the eggs have come home to roost. Because when the sociologists and the various researchers back in 2001, back in 1999, 1998, they were telling us that certain things are creeping into our society. Foreign media, games, all the various things that we've been talking about for years. All like them, the birds were scattering the seeds of destruction. So when we come now to believe that this thing started yesterday, last month, or last year, we will be fooling ourselves. And deeply so. We will be engaging in an exercise of folly. But it is not okay to stop at the seeds of destruction. We now have got to plant and fertilize the seeds of production. And what are those seeds, sir? What can we do to ensure that we got to pick the fruits of destruction? And I think what the Honourable Attorney General has laid out today must be commended. The creativity of it, and because we got to deal with this in the short term, we got to reduce the heat across the length and breadth of Barbados. So don't think that we only going for the root cause. We got to deal with the fruit too. And the fruit can get picked. Because when you look at the creativeness and the innovation of putting the murder and the firearms on a level playing field, that you can do the two trials together. In the case where, again, you can get off for a murder case, but still be tried for the firearm, I think that is innovative, sir. I challenge the attorneys to find the loopholes there, sir. I challenge them, sir. You know what I'm talking about, sir.
They will be found, sir.
The whole idea of understanding the need for a jury of 9 and the jury of 12 and making it just a flat-out jury of 12 and be able to do both of them, sir. I commend the innovation there. In terms of making it more effective and creating more of a deterrent, the moving from concurrent to consecutive, sir. Doubling the sentence. So you don't serve a 5-year and 2 5 years and 1 5 years. You're serving a 10-year. And go ahead, if you get 10. You're serving 20. And that is very, very important in the short term, sir. Why am I saying that? I know of young men in this country. I know of blocks in this country where they see their colleagues and their partners in crime commit crime, commit murder, commit homicide, commit manslaughter in this country. Go to the police station for a few days, in some cases a few months, and then come and sit down next to them in 28 days. What message are we sending? Are we building a hut or are we building a nation? Because you have to understand the psychological impact that has on particularly a young member's mind. Where I could see somebody go and take part in a heinous crime, and then a few days later come and sit down next to me and hold a little meddy. It says to me that I can do so too with impunity. I can do so too and return to the same very block and sit down next to you and have a drink of Marby or whatever. And that is the point. Marby or brandy. Brandy or whatever else to chase it with. I will not mention that, sir. But that is important. What is also important is that we understand the characteristics of crime in the country. One of the things in my reading that shocked me, sir, is that between 1999 and 2003, we had a reduction in crime, but an increase in fear in crime. We had a reduction in crime, but we had an increase in fear in crime. And I think that is probably what was responsible in large measure when people reading the pulse of the people, that in 1999 and in 2003 we had a campaign called Crime and Violence. Crime and Violence. Because people were riding on the backs of the fear of crime. But we had crime going down, sir. Even so, in the early 80s, a lot of us in here would not want to know or even feel comfortable to know that we had crime at 150 for every 100,000 in Barbados. And that we had a reduction down to 30, from 150 down to 30. So we had a drop in crime, while at the same time, an increase in fear in crime. But sir, it makes no sense reinventing the wheel. When I go to the draft national plan on justice, peace, and security, done just about 18 years ago, everyone wants to this.
Honourable, this document in the House already?
Of course, I made this a document of the House. Of course. With my pleasure, sir. And we can look at the seeds of crime. We can go and we can look and we can see. In our society, there was the warning bells being sounded. In terms of, at a point in time, Barbados, if you reflect, it would have been pretty young, sir. But it's my understanding that we lived as a community. We lived as a village. We lived as a collective. And when you live as a collective, when you have many people, common unity, aka community, even if it is a common unity of people living rich or poor, there's less envy, there's less dissatisfaction, there's less animosity, and there's less crime. When you move from that, with the penetration of foreign media, to the individualism, the meism, the lack of ability to delay gratification, what the Honourable Member months ago called the get rich quick scheme, the need and the desire to get rich quick, instant gratification, All of these are the seeds of destruction planted and well watered and cared for that put us to reap the fruits that we are reaping right now. So I want to turn to my favorite part. And my favorite part is really, what are the solutions? What are the solutions? The solutions, as I said before, sir, we've got to plant the seeds of production. And we have to water it with love. I am not playing, sir. We have to water it with love. We have to nurture it with giving of our time, our talent, our treasure, and teamwork. When I talk about love and watering it with love is that each and every one of us in here needs more love and kindness. You may see it as a small thing, sir. A lot of people may not understand that a lot of people in here in Barbados that are acting the fool with these firearms, sir, they need arms of love. That's what they need. And if you doubt that, you doubt the fact, sir. You have to nurture it, as I said, with giving of our time. We've got to go back to the time when we cared about each other. How can we volunteer our time? How can a neighbor, a nurse, whoever, choose 2 or 3 persons in your community, your sphere of influence, in your workplace, in your church, to give of your time, to give of your talent, to give of your treasure, your money, because it costs to care. But sir, I want to emphasize one of the things that gives me great pleasure, and that is to sit and stand and work with this team. Because when I think of this team, sir, I think of a cruise ship. And unlike other cruise ships of state, we have a rudder. We are not aimlessly drifting. We have an engine. When I think of the technology, I know we have a sail. I know that. We have the state. Those are the passengers. And sir, this is the crew. And this ain't a lazy crew. This is a crew that can tell you it in the 8-hour days, sometimes 18, 20-hour days. This crew is on the deck with the scrubbing brush, sir, on the floor, and we scrubbing, and we scrubbing, and we scrubbing. Led, sir, but we all know who. The captain. We got a captain. And we got direction. We got our bearings, and we are going in the right direction. And when the question is asked where RS Barbados is going, we can clearly see by the direction of our policies, our bills, the amendments that we bring to this chamber. And I want Barbadians to support this cruise ship, because they got some people out there offering you a ride on a Moses. Stick with the cruise ship, because this cruise ship is heading to the high seas. It's get rough. COVID has come and shake me up a bit. You get a little turbulence, a little seasickness. Things get a little bad. The hurricanes and so on. Shake up the ship, man. That has happened. But because we have this crew and we are led by the captain, the first mate, and we know where we are going, I am confident that we can win this war. And when you ask me what it is and where is we are going, it is clear for me to tell you that what we need to do in relation to crime prevention, and it is my honor to work in the office of the Attorney General, to be able to coordinate the existing programs, to be able to kickstart the programs in the pipeline that would help with crime prevention, and to be able to work with all of Barbados to start some of the unstarted programs. Because I would never stop saying that we are in this together. We will sink or we will sail together. We will sink or we will sail together. So I have a message, sir, through you, to those Barbadians that digging holes in the ship. that poking holes in the ship, that tampering with the engine, that pulling at the sail, that you on this ship together too. And if we go down together. And if we rise, sir, we rise together. Let those who have ears, let them hear. I am happy to be able to stand here today before you, sir, and pledge not only my commitment, but my whole body, soul, mind, to the efforts of crime prevention, to work with the Ministry of Education, to work with the Ministry of Youth and Community Development and Sports, to work with the Ministry of People Empowerment, and continue to work with the Ministry of People Empowerment, to work with the Ministry of Culture and all other ministries, sir. That is where the real crime prevention is. Because as the Attorney General rightfully said, we have a notion in this country that crime prevention is the remit and the only remit of the Attorney General. When really and truly, that is at the end phase. It is after something has happened. So I am glad that we are sending a signal that yes, for coordination purposes, we are with the Attorney General with crime prevention, but that we are working with the real crime prevention ministries, which I have mentioned. Because I tell people already, I was already working in crime prevention when I'm working in poverty. You're working in crime prevention when you're working on education and education reform, sir. You're working on crime prevention, sir, when you're working with the youth of this country and you're providing sports opportunities for them. And the list goes on. All of that is crime prevention, sir. And a need for Barbadians, because it's almost like they can hear, because I've been saying it for years. And when I read the reports coming out of this country, I was pleasantly surprised to see that we were saying this all back in the 90s, sir, and even before. But for some reason, there are a set of people out there that never heard it, because they're repeating it all like no still. What law enforcement record does Corey has? Was he ever a policeman? Was he ever a security guard? Won't even ask. The same must he was a bouncer. I read and heard all of that, sir, from people that should know better. But it's okay, sir. We humble ourselves, we take all the comments, and we use them to do the job and get the job done. This is because, sir, it is important for me before I close to at least give people an understanding in this debate of some of the things that we intend to do beyond amendments to the Firearm Act to help with crime prevention in this country. I think it's very important to let us set the stage and set the stage right. In the short term, sir, there are going to be a number of direct initiatives and direct intervention, going where we need to go. Fortunately or unfortunately, I can say no more on those things, but just for the public to know that we will be engaging in some direct intervention. There are things that we've done over the past that were indirect. A sound here, a sign there, a t-shirt campaign here and there. Those are very indirect, sir. And those things, okay, some may continue. But I want the public to know in the short term, there are some direct things that we will be doing. In the medium term, as we continue to water and nurture the seeds of production, for the tree of production, there are issues that we have to continue to grapple with at our courts and on our ports, and in relation to police relations in communities, just to name a few. And in the long term, sir, where we will now start to pick different fruits of the tree of production, there are certain things that we need to start to work on today, which would bear fruit down the road, some 20 years from now. And that is relooking the values of our young people, the values of parenting, the values that we have in our school and in our society. All of those things we have to start all like now. But you would not reap the fruit of them now. If you start to work with 4-year-olds now, if you start to work with primary school students now, do not look for the results of a 20-year-old next year. because we're working with the primary schools as well, sir. If there's anything new that I want to propose here among the list, because there's still a lot of collaboration that needs to occur, sir, that is that one of the things that I've not seen in my reading as yet is a proposal for a zero tolerance to the small things to prevent the big things. And what do I mean? Many of us would have been told as little boys and little girls, do not take up even a pencil. You start with a pencil and then you become a thief. And if I was to refer to New York crack broken window program, that is why when they take all the little small things and they get very serious about it, because we are very tolerant with small crimes in this country. We are very tolerant with the wheelies on the streets. We are very tolerant with people breaking lights, red lights in this country. And sir, it only starts there. But then it manifests itself into greater things. So I believe that Barbados needs its own crack paint or its shirt tail program, whatever you want to call it. Because one of the things that we have to realize is that as school is one of the primary socialization institutions in the country, when you have students walking up and down the road, shirt tails out, swearing like them in the fish market, it starts there. And we got to be serious even about those things to send a message that we can get serious about the small things before they become big things. And that is one of the examples that I want for the chamber to understand in the terms of the direction, the philosophy that we have towards crime prevention. One of the things too that is very important now is the idea of wisdom. And that is why we're going to have the Wise Up program. The Wise Up program is not just a slogan or to sound pretty. The Wise Up program is to understand that back in the day, one of the things that anchored and rooted Barbados in the things that we do is the idea of proverbs and parables. Very simple things that our parents taught us, our grandparents taught us. Harder as you went here, or where you would feed. Very simple parables that caused us to wise up one way or the other. One of the things that we have to institute back into this country, sir, is wisdom. One of the reasons that Jesus spoke to the disciples in parables is because he wanted them to be wise. When you could figure out a riddle calls you to think, to ponder, to figure out, to use your creative energy, to use creative thinking. All of these are things that we do not look or think about when we think about crime, you know. We just think about somebody shooting and somebody getting locked up. But when you think about going down to the root and going down to the seed, sir, all down there is where we need to go. We have to tear away, pull away the soil and go down into the root of what is causing these things. And I want to assure the chamber, sir, that all of these things are things that are occupying the office of the Attorney General, specifically when it comes to crime prevention. Now, sir, as we embark on this Barbados project, if people believe that we are not in this together, I can remind them that burglar bars does not stop bullets. There are weapons out there that pierce cedar blocks, 6-inch and 8-inch too. So we are in this together. If you did not understand that before, I hope that you can understand it now. And I'm not here to bring fear to anybody. I'm here to bring fair play. But I'm not here to bring fear to the society. What we need is fairness and justice, sir. And the Honourable Attorney General said it right when he said that these gun crimes and these firearm crimes, they do not stop at the person who shoot and who was shot. It affects us all. I've been to too many candlelight vigils since becoming an MP, sir. I've been to too many funerals of young men and women in this country. I have sat and cried with too many families who tell me regularly of the devastation that they have on the anniversary of the death, on Christmas time, on the birthday of the deceased, and the list goes on and on and on. The needs of the children that are left behind. But if that ain't get you to sit up and care yet, sir, let me add on the use of the QEH beds for surgery and to hold the injured. So that when you or I or my grandmother or yours can't get a surgery, can't get a bed, can't get a gurney to put in the ambulance to go to somebody. If you're interested to understand where this falls, yeah, I hope that I am painting the correct picture. That we are all in this together. There's a lady who was going to buy bread, sir. Buy bread. Something that many people eat. That didn't make it back home. There are people who went to Sheridan to shop. They've been in a war with anybody, sir. So if you feel all of the criminals kill themselves, anything but I don't kill all themselves, lock up all and kill all them. It don't work so, sir. Especially in 166 square miles. Does not work like that. So, sir, I would like all Barbadians to look into the mirror, not only for a mirror image, but to ask themselves the question, are you ready to take on this fight? Because I am. And I want all Barbadians to answer the question, are you ready to wise up? Parents, are you ready? Fathers particularly, are you ready? Teachers, policemen, artists, DJs, the whole media, opposition, church, neighbors, are you ready to pledge allegiance to your country, Barbados, and to your flag, to uphold and defend their honor, and by your living, to do credit to your nation, to do credit to my nation, to do credit to our nation, wherever you go. I want Barbadians to ask themselves the question, because do not think about the cost of doing this. I want us to think about the cost of not doing it, sir. And with that, I want to pledge my full support to this Firearms Amendment Bill 2022 and ask that all Barbadians rally together as we take on this fight. Sir, thank you.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following after the Honourable Member for the City, I want to first of all commend him for his appointment to this new position. I think he has demonstrated just from that maiden speech yet again in this chamber and in this new role, his seriousness, but also his commitment to being able to not only help our young people, but to bring the real life situation of what is happening on the streets in this country to the people of this country. I want to state from the outset that as a member of this government and certainly as a sitting MP for St. Michael, one of the areas in this country where we often have a lot of crime concentrated, that I wholeheartedly support the amendments being made to the firearms bill. I do so because, like many of the other honourable members in this chamber, and in particular the ones in St. Michael, I have had to also experience the grief, the trauma, the disruption of lives in a community as a result of gun violence and as a result of violence generally, because I really feel that while we are here to talk about firearm offenses, the truth of the matter is that this debate is also about the level of violence in our society in all its forms, sir. In my community, in the St. Michael's of Peace community, I have seen the impact of our young men in particular brandishing their guns to shoot in response to perhaps a strong word, an issue over their illegal substances. They don't like the attitude or the way somebody looks at them. And a whole war sometimes takes place, sir, over the inability of our people to be able to deal with conflict resolution. And too often it has ended in a situation where someone ends up losing their life. Sometimes it is intended, sir. Other times the reality is that it is not. But we all know as lawyers what happens even if you haven't intended those consequences. That especially when you're not trained to use the firearm, that it can very often end in a situation where not only the intended recipient, but also other persons who are living in the area or within the community also become the victims of crime, sir. I have had young people sitting liming under a tree, getting gunned down because they were not the intended recipient of the bullet. But they were, as a result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or in the right place, but at the wrong time, lost their life because somebody decided that their life did not matter, sir. So I couldn't come here this morning on something as important as this firearm amendment bill, allowed the AG to speak, the honourable member for the city, and I know all others are lined up and queued in because we've all been impacted by this. I couldn't come here this morning, sir, and not speak to the seriousness of these changes that we are intending to make. I sat in an opposition, sir, where from on the other side, I heard members of the last administration accuse people like me of mingling with the people who were on the blocks, assaults on my character because I attempted to go into communities to talk to our people, and our young people in particular, to bring an end to gun violence and violence in all its forms within communities, sir. Because there was a time in my community where there was almost an imaginary line across their pasture, the Parkinson Field pasture, where you could not venture if you were not part of one block or you were not part of another block because of the seriousness of the gun violence in the community, sir. That is how crazy it was at one point in this country. And I sat on the other side being accused of those things. You mustn't mix with people at a certain level. You mustn't condone behavior. Not that I condoning it, but I believe that if I am to be part of an administration to effect change, I must also understand the way people think, the reasons why people are engaging in criminal activity, and also being part of a system that is able to help them make better decisions and to understand the consequences of the decisions that they have taken, sir. So when they say, sir, that some of us will socialize with certain elements in society, we do so not because we condone, but we do so because we are trying to get to the root cause of the problem, to be able to not be part of the problem, but to be part of the transformation in our society, sir. It is why this administration came to office and immediately set about to do the Building Blocks program. I have been the beneficiary of that program, and I have seen in St. Michael's Southeast a transformation of young men and women whose blocks were once on the target list for the police, being able to now sit down in a classroom and learn how to do entrepreneurship, sir. Learning how to run a business, seeing themselves now in a completely different light than the rest of the public perhaps perceive them. But they now feel empowered because we have given them an opportunity to be able to own their own space to operate their business. And sir, you know what is interesting? You know, people will say that the young people don't want to see these changes, but I can proudly stand here and say that, you know, there are times when you tell yourself that people don't want to be visible. The blocks don't want people to see what is going on. They're happy to see all the bush and the trees and hide behind the old canteens in the community. But But I am proud, sir, to say that in my constituency today, because of that Building Blocks program, young men and women want to see a transformation of their community, want to see the old structures that would have created a belief by people traversing an area that they were nobody or that they were to remain at the bottom. All of a sudden, uplift them in a way that they now want to be part of the mainstream society, the mainstream economic activity within this country, sir. And other members can speak to how the Building Blocks program has transformed communities. I wish we could do more, but of course it is done according to how the finances permit. But I say, sir, that I've seen the transformation of blocks that traditionally gave the police hell, gave our communities hell because of issues of young men brandishing guns and shooting at each other. And what does it say, sir? Because I give that reference because it means that just as we have given the support to the Attorney General to have somebody within his ministry who has a deeper appreciation of what happens on the streets, it speaks to a government that is not just prepared to lock up people at will, but a government that understands that, as the AG says, you don't wait till you get to 21 and pick up a gun and start shooting. There are social conditions, there are things within the households that lead to the consequences that we see in our society. When 10 and 15 people are living in a household, sir, in densely populated communities across this country, when they are being raised, or young men and women being raised, in some cases in single parent families, fathers nowhere to be found in many situations, no kind of father figures, no positive images in their lives to tell them right from wrong. They're not even getting any level of religious instruction to at least give them a foundation to decipher right and wrong. We understand that those are the societal issues that we are confronting, and unless we address the issues of the 10,000 households in terms of homes to be built to ease the pressure on communities, unless we are able to ease the pressure in densely populated communities, sir, we also as a society are contributing to the same problems that we are here trying to address today. Because if the household is too cramped, people go outside on the block. If mother and father don't have enough to put in the children's pockets to send them to school, the drug lord or the lead man on the block is going to find a way to give it to them. If it is that a pair of boots needs to be bought for football because the youngster show that he's up and coming and promising, and there's nobody, no godfather. Many of these children don't have godfathers, they don't have fairy godmothers. They got the parent and the siblings, and plenty of them. And oftentimes they turn to the people who offer to assist. And that assistance comes in many, many, many forms. From the mother who asks the drug man to be able to assist him or her. From the child who needs the food, to the little change to be able to get to town or to get a pair of shoes bought for them, sir. That is our reality. So the AG is perfectly right. It does not start when the child first holds the gun, the young man first holds the gun. It starts from before. And that is why our programs on coming to government have been focused on trying to address the issues with our young people. The programs within our schools have been focused on that, sir. We had a program once. I remember my first introduction to marijuana and hard drugs was under the DARE program. Many of you would recall there was a program where police officers used to come into the schools and they would actually show you the various illegal substances. They would talk to you within the school environment. People used to look up to police officers because they came in their attire, but they were talking to you as a student and explaining to you not just what they did, but about the dangers of drug use and abuse, and about gangs in this country, sir. Under the last administration, those programs were taken out of our system. And this administration has made that commitment to ensure that our police get back to a level of policing in this country where they are in a position to go back into communities. I have an excellent police officer in St. Michael's Southeast that I work with on various programs, sir. That is it. Community policing is at the core of this. There are many students who, when I was Minister of Education and I would go to the graduations, would ask me, when I asked them, what they want to be when they grow up. Many of them tell you that they want to be a police officer because they admire the persons in uniform. As a young child growing up in primary school, they want to be a police officer. But sir, the difficulty is, and I can talk it straight today, because the difficulty is that by the time they turn 13, 14, 15, and they become more acutely aware of what is happening and about selecting professions, we then have creeping into our society through the music and other influences a situation where you are told as a young man, you mustn't snitch, that you mustn't tell on anybody who is carrying a gun, that the police, you don't want to be an informer. A lot of these things, and as somebody who has been involved in music and been working with artists all over the world, I do understand the influence that music has on a population, and in particular on impressionable minds. If you are from a certain class in this society, you can hear certain music and it's not going to make you take up a gun, a knife, or anything and become lawless and reckless in this society. But if all that you hear every day is the glorification of the holder of a gun, shooting down people, killing people, not caring about life, sir, that is your reality. And we as a society need to understand that our reality sometimes and the reality of others is at cross purposes. Not for us to judge, but we must put ourselves in a position where we understand that our reality, our ability to make decisions in terms of right and wrong, comes because sometimes we may have a different position. It may be our different experience. We may have the mentors, we may have the sound parental guidance. But there's a large percentage of our people, in particular our young people, who don't ever get that. That is why, as members of parliament and as people who are in a better position to be able to help, I make the call for people to get off their high horse, sir. Get into communities. If you care about what is happening in our society, ask yourself, when last have you been that individual to help a young man or woman, mentor them in some way to be able to help them to make better decisions, sir? How many people can say that? Because sometimes we turn the other cheek. We don't like to deal with these issues. We are afraid to basically step into communities because we don't know what is going to confront us, sir. But the truth of the matter is, the member for the city, many of us in this chamber are able to go into the communities and get to the root cause of the problem. And to be able not only to empathize, but to be able to mentor our young men and women in a different way, sir. And there is more that can be done by our country, by our people. If they say they care, all of our service groups need to do more in order to make sure that not only you have the breakfast programs in communities, but that you have the teenage programs to be able to teach men to be men and boys to be able to grow into men and good men, sir. That corporate entities are able to start back programs within communities, giving back of their time and their services. Because it is the positive influences in all of our lives that have put us here. I heard the Honourable Member for St. Thomas giving me a story this morning about her younger days and how she has progressed in life, even though the start of her early days was not an easy one, sir. You were there with me, Mrs. Speaker, and you heard that her circumstances did not leave her in this position in which she started. But sometimes it requires that adult or that other person to be able to step to the fore to be able to show you a different way. And all I'm saying, sir, is that we all are in this together. This is not the parent whose child has gone astray's problem that was brandishing the gun. This is not the sibling of the child, the person who has tried to shoot somebody's problem. This is our problem. One of the things that struck me when I was Minister of Education was a study that we did on the children who were creating the most challenges within our educational system, the ones that we tend to call deviant. When we dug a little deeper, we sent in the psychologists and the sociologists and all of the rest of the team from within the ministry, sir. You know what we discovered? Many of these children had also been the victims of some level of violence as well, whether in their households growing up or they were still experiencing levels of violence. But one of the things that stood out, sir, was the fact that many of them were dealing with unresolved grief. Grief as a result of their father getting gunned down in a community. Grief as a result of some family member being violently taken as a result of whether gun crimes or knives or some other violence, sir. And the reality is that many of these issues, we think that because these young people, they're children, so they don't know any better. But in densely populated communities, I'll tell you this, many of our children, they don't separate the children from the big people talk. So the children hear the same things that the adults are talking about, which in some households, the children, you will hear tell the children, this conversation is for you. I have been in households where in tragic situations as a result of gun violence, the talk is talked in front of our young people. They hear who the revenge is going to be taken on. They hear how many shots the person got that took their relative's life, sir. And they must pick up themselves and go to school on the Monday as though nothing has happened. Carrying with them the anger, the transferred fears and angers that the adults have transferred on to them, sir. That is our reality. So when you see the children acting out as well, beg the question, how our children have gotten there. And the call, therefore, is not just for parents or to place blame on parents or to say that the parents need to do more, sir, but for parents to also understand their responsibility to their children as well. That we as a society have a responsibility to our children. That our children are seeing the social media posts of people bleeding to death in the road, gunned down by some other person, sir. That's our reality. Every child now has access to some kind of post on social media. So it's no longer hidden from children the dangers of guns and what violence can do. But when you see it and you don't have a context or an explanation as to that this is not the right way, then you come to believe as well that it is okay as well to post these pictures or in some cases to be violent as well. These are the things that we need to dig deeper into, and parents need to pay attention to that. Our counselors within our schools have to pay attention to that as well, sir. But I couldn't also stand here and say to you that as we talk about tightening the position of the police and the courts in relation to firearm offenses, that we don't also have some issues in relation to how our police at times may treat to their investigation of crime. Because again, I come from a community where I can tell you we don't have criminal activity taking place. It's all over Barbados. But what has been introduced into our culture in recent times is a situation where on any occasion where the police go into communities, you have a situation where people start to whip out their cell phone. And in so doing, it means that the officer is now put under even more pressure to ensure that procedures are followed by the letter of the law, or otherwise they are going to be videotaped and that video gets disseminated to the general public. Now, my difficulty is twofold, because I believe that if officers go into communities, they must do their job, but they must do their job according to the law. If they are going to arrest people, then they need to follow the rules in relation to those measures of arrest. Equally disturbing, however, sir, is the fact that the public believes that it is okay to post these images and these videos on social media because they feel now as though the only way that you are going to get any kind of satisfaction from complaining about the behavior of the police is if you take a picture or a video and you post it all over social media to show that the police have entered into your community, okay? And sir, I think that just as we have had to do with all other areas where we try to talk the country through these things are not right, sir. The police need to get their approach right, but equally, the public has to appreciate that everything can and cannot be posted because it doesn't look good. The other thing is that you have a situation where we need to make sure that our officers are continuously trained in the use of their own firearm, because I am mindful that you have a situation in this country where these young men who are brandishing guns have never been on a range, don't know how to use the gun, and in some cases, as I said before, end up with unintended persons being shot and killed. And therefore, my call is to strengthen the training of our police officers in this country, because our officers must not be made to feel as though they are to live in fear going into communities where they know that the criminals have bigger and better guns than them, or because they are going to shoot wildly, that they have not had the benefit of as much expertise in terms of training to shoot. I ain't tell no police officer go in and shoot and kill nobody. I'm saying if you are going to shoot, you must ensure that you are basically as properly trained for those types of situations as much as possible, sir. I believe that the people who we speak about in terms of persons who carry firearms, it can't be just that you get the firearm and you have it because you've been at risk, but you're not either carrying it or that you are not ensuring that you yourself are also properly trained. And therefore, those are two areas that I think, both from a police perspective, but also from the persons who carry firearms. There are many people in this country, sir, who have obtained firearms and never go back onto the range to practice. That is the reality, because they probably think they will never use the gun. But I believe, sir, that if you have a firearm, then things must be put in place to make sure that you know how to use it in defense if in the event that a situation arises where you have to use it. I want to, though, commend the Royal Barbados Police Service, because the truth is that I don't know any other institution in this country that has been put under so much pressure within the last few years. And I don't say that lightly. Even during COVID, the police were put under pressure even then. They got a little ease to some extent, but in the same token, a lot of things started to brew within communities that the police are now dealing with, sir. And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, that I think they ought to be commended for the efforts that they've made with the very limited resources at times. I know that this administration, as the AG said, has tried its best to make sure that the Royal Barbados Police Service has been strengthened in terms of its surveillance equipment, in terms of all of the other aspects that would allow officers to do the job. And therefore, we are appreciative of the efforts made by the service in order to wrestle to the ground criminal activity. My only caution is to make sure that due process is followed so that you do not have, Mr. Speaker, to have our people calling on you for intervention in the law courts. That is all I ask. But I am a firm believer, especially in my constituency, that we cannot uphold people fearing for their lives. I have no difficulty with the Royal Barbados Police Service doing its job. Royal Barbados Police Service doing...
The Barbados Police Service.
Barbados Police Service, sorry, sir. Doing their job. I just ask for the dispensation of the justice, the intervention to be done in a manner that the general public is comfortable in relation to the execution of their duties, because they will get more cooperation when they do the right thing. And we all know that situations escalate, sir, But at the end of the day, once they are doing the right thing, they can't go wrong within this country. The persons who this amendment is intended to address, sir, are the persons who may be involved in gun crimes and who may be contemplating getting further involved in gun crimes, not the ones who have already wrapped up a number of criminal convictions. We're dealing with the ones that are on the verge of committing, because we have a responsibility to protect this society. And it isn't just about tightening it so we lock away a couple people and get them off of the streets, sir. I would want to see that in terms of our rehabilitation, that we take another quick look at the rehabilitation in our prison. That we take a quick look at the fact that many of these persons, the statistics will show, they come back out. And because there is no structure to be able often to deal with the reintegration into society, the reality is the families don't want them because they don't want nobody who has been to prison in the house. The families may even be fearing for their own lives because whoever the accused may have interfered with, there may be a barrage of persons waiting to knock him off once he comes out of jail. And many families find themselves in a situation where they are fearful of being able to entertain persons coming back home. We need to look at this because the chances of those persons reoffending is extremely high, sir, because in many cases you get the phone calls, ma'am, I want something to do. And easily they cannot be integrated into, say, the public service unless they are contract workers, or in some cases unless the private entities want to take in those individuals, sir. And it is a challenge because the reality is they are stigmatized the minute they have gone into the prison. They are stigmatized, as are many others, for other offenses. When they come out trying to find some form of gainful employment, sir. I hope that the Honourable Member for the City, in his valiant efforts in the ministry, the Office of the Attorney General, will take some of these things into account in strengthening the way we deal with the community policing, the way we deal with the rehabilitation of offenders, the ability to be able to give people at least a second chance to turn their lives around. There are too many people that we will often hear went to prison and all of a sudden we find out about these great talents that they have. They become painters, they become chefs, they become all kinds of things in prison. And that too is a reflection not only on our educational system, but is a reflection on our society, because it means that we have not tapped in to the natural talents that many of these people have, because we have been so focused on trying to get people to a common entrance examination to be able to perfect their maths and English, but oftentimes forgetting that the little youngster might have had a good skill using his hands, but nobody didn't tap into that. Because that doesn't get you to the top 7 schools in the country. So they're discarded. And the one thing I know about this administration is that we understand that the current system that we have in terms of education is failing a lot of the people who is the subject of this firearms offences amendment, sir. I'm not saying it is the cause of why they end up there, but I'm saying that we have to look at the fact that you cannot tell me that they have skills in prison, but nobody from the time that they were in primary school right through to secondary school knew that they had any skills and were able to intervene and to tap into those skills in order to get the best out of them. And so, sir, we got to look at this thing. We got to turn this thing on its head. Because in our attempt to transform and to reform the educational system and to introduce the coding and the robotics and to focus more on technical and vocational training, we have to appreciate that it cannot just be about the maths and the English, but it must be about creating an educational system which taps into the natural talents of our people, ensuring that we have schools for the creatives, that we have schools that are going to be able to do the fintech. We have schools that are going to be able to exploit the languages. That a child does not determine, or a parent does not determine a child's destiny, that it must go to one of 7 schools. And if they don't go to one of those 7, that they're nobody. but that a child can determine and its parents from early on that it wants to go to a school specialized in a particular area because a parent recognizes that their child has a particular gift, that the child is somewhere on the spectrum, that just the standard routine curriculum in its current form does not cater for the true talents of that child, sir. And there were statistics done in relation to the persons who have been convicted of offenses at the prison. And you will see the statistics in terms of the schools that many of these students came from, sir. We need to fix that. Because otherwise, we become a part of the problem if we do not start to accept that the system that we have has served us well, but it has served some of us well. For the vast majority that are creating the problems and wreaking havoc in our society, it has not served them well, sir. Because I'm sure that the ones who passed with 100% in the common entrance exam are not up in the prison at this point in time. And we must ask ourselves, what are we going to do for the ones who are gifted, but gifted in different ways academically, that we must now tap into and to root out the difficulties that those young people will have, sir. This bill must send a message to the society that we are serious about gun violence, that we are serious about violence in this country, that we are not prepared to allow a society to back down because a few people in our society have difficulty with conflict resolution. It is also to send a message that while we intend to enforce the law, we're going to increase the number of judges to deal with the backlog, that we also don't intend to stop there, but we also understand and intend to address the social dislocation that is existing in our society. And I am comfortable that the programs that we have, while we can't reverse the hands of time overnight, that this administration understands that all hands are to the plow, and we have to make sure that our social programs are strengthened within communities, getting back community centers open. It is a blessing to my soul to know that lights are going into communities across this country so that young men and women have an opportunity to burn off some energy, sir, on the pasture. Because the thing within communities in the city in particular is that in the St. Michael areas is that once you have activities going on, you have a reduction in criminal activity. It don't mean a felling and sell a little sign here and there, sir. But our reality is that at least, as I tell the police, you know where people are. If they're on a football field or they're outside playing a 2020, you know where they are and you can police where they are. Our biggest problem is that sometimes we're not realizing that when we don't put in these programs, we leave the youngsters to go all over the place, giving the police even more stress. That is the reality, sir. But our programs are designed to try to bring back community life, to ensure that we strengthen our social programs so that we can deal with it. So whether it is our housing, whether it is the additional lights, whether it is the additional playing fields, whether it is ensuring that the social service reform is done so that people do not feel as though if they are struggling that they are not treated with human dignity, sir. It is a whole of government approach, it is a whole of society approach that this administration has to embark on in order to turn around the tide that is sweeping through our country, sir. And so I could not, therefore, not be here and not participate in this debate. I want to thank the Honourable Member again for St. Joseph for introducing this amendment, and certainly the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, who I believe has also weighed in on other aspects. I know he will speak to the issues of the sporting provisions within the bill. But just to say, sir, that I'm fully support it, and therefore with those few words, sir, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Sir, I rise to weigh in on the Firearm Amendment Bill 2022, and I realize it has become my lot, and I happily wear the hat, sometimes to break down into simple language for the public to break down into simple language for the public, what the actual amendments are and to demystify the process that we have in here. Quite often, sir, when people don't actually understand what is going on, they run off with their own thoughts about amendments to legislation, and they have questions as to why not a new piece of legislation, why was this touched and not that, what does this really mean? And sometimes there's a distrust in the system. So I have happily, sir, put on the hat where I raise something, sir, to simplify it so that everybody can follow what is going on. Now, sir, in relation to this legislation, sir, the intention was set out in the objects, which is at the front of the piece of legislation. And they basically, in summary, say that this bill would revise the offences relating to the use of firearms, revise the penalties for offences under that act, provide for licenses for firearms for the purpose of hunting and sport shooting, and to provide for related matters. Now, the Honourable Attorney General, sir, has spoken in detail about the other improvements to our justice system that we're bringing in to tackle the increasing incidence of crime. So I'm not going to touch those. He also outlined some aspects of the legislation. So I will just expand upon some of those that I believe need clarification on. Now, sir, one of the amendments that was made was to the definition of what is an imitation firearm, because the Firearm Act covers not only guns or offences involving guns that can actually be fired, but also some that cannot. So what a lot of people don't understand is that if you have something that purports to be a gun or can be mistaken to be a gun, and you wave it around to cause fear to people, or you try to pretend that it is a firearm in order to extort money from someone, then you are charged under the same Firearms Act as if what you're holding in your hand was capable of being shot. The initial definition, sir, included the word toy gun, and that caused some confusion. So that was cleaned up, sir, so that the definition of an imitation firearm now means anything which has the appearance of being a firearm but is not a firearm, whether or not it is capable of discharging any shot, bullet, or other missile. I don't think anybody can be confused now as to what is caught under the Act. If you have anything that can be mistaken for a firearm and you use that in the commission of an offense, further down in legislation it talks about brandishing it. So you use it in the commission of an offense, then you can be charged under the Firearm Act as if what you were actually holding in your hand was a firearm. So people need to understand that it is a fear that you cause to other people. Because if I pull a gun from my waist and point at somebody and try to rob them, or I pull a piece of wood that is cut in the shape of a gun and try to rob them, and that person turns and runs across the road and get knocked down by a car, it doesn't matter that it was not a gun, right? It is what fear or what did they actually interpret that my actions were capable of causing. So sometimes the fear of something, or as you know, sir, you tend to, under the criminal law, intend the natural and probable consequences of your action. So if I pull something from my waist that is incapable of being fired and point it in your direction and you get a heart attack, then I would be charged under the Firearm Act as if I had pointed a gun at you and you got a heart attack from it. And that could actually probably constitute murder. Now, sir, the Attorney General also spoke to the prosecution of offences, and Section 29, which a new part of the section, it says any person who uses a firearm or an imitation firearm, whether by discharging the firearm or brandishing or otherwise using the firearm or imitation firearm, while committing an offense, is guilty of an offense. So it also continues that a person who aids, abets, counsel, or procures another or conspires with another to commit an offense, and this act is guilty of an offense and is liable to the same punishment as is provided for that offense. So if I conspire with the honourable member for the city to go and rob someplace, and I arrange to pick him up afterwards, and he goes in and he does it with the firearm, and I, knowing he did it, go and collect him outside and whisk him away, or help him to burn his clothes or otherwise conceal it or conceal him in my house, sir, then I am liable to the exact same penalty that he is. So people need to understand now, it is not simply if you do it, but if you aid someone in evading detection or aid them in committing the crime, you are liable to the extent that they are as well. The government is removing all of the gray areas in its intention to deal with firearms. The harshest possible penalties are being provided for, so no one can be under any doubt whatsoever as to the position that the government is taking in relation to illegal firearms or firearm offenses. Now, sir, one other thing that I wish to clear up. The Attorney General had indicated as well that if you are charged with offenses under the Firearms Act, then if you have multiple charges, then the sentences are concurrent. We know, sir, that quite often you hear people don't understand what's the difference between consecutive and concurrent. Quite often you hear somebody is found guilty of X charge, charge 1, charge 2, charge 3, and the judge at the end said that these sentences run concurrently. It means that all of them are served at the exact same time. So if you have a 1 year, a 2 year, and a 5 year, you will serve 5 years being the longest sentence. Now, what this is saying is that if you have charges under the Firearms Act, for every penalty or every sentence that is levied on you, that sentence is in addition to the sentence for the other one and for the other one. So if you have 3 charges and the judge sentences you on all 3 to time, you add that time together, and that is what you actually serve. Now, that is very important for people to note. But it goes further, sir. It goes further. And this is to show how seriously we're taking this. If you get convicted of a firearm offense following this amendment, then the penalty that you get is served in addition to any other sentence that you are serving at the time that that offense was committed. So, if, sir, I had a charge for weed, I guess, or trafficking, and you got a 5 year for that, and I am then convicted of the firearm offense, and I go to jail for that too, I start to serve my penalty for the firearm offense when the 5 years for the other one has run out. So I don't want people to actually be confused. So it's not a case of you go and you plead guilty to a whole set of things and you just get your time, you throw in your towel and you serve out. Any sentence that you get once this legislation is now passed is tacked on to any other sentence that you are serving. So for the firearm offenses, the sentences are clear, they stand alone, and they're added on to anything else that you might be serving. Now, sir, this is a departure in terms of sentencing or recommendations for sentencing or penalties, sir, than we have anywhere else in our law. And it shows that the government is serious about what we are doing. We have carved out a space for firearm offenses. We have carved out specific legislation. We have created more judges to deal with it and bring it under control. And we also say, in addition to that, the sentences stand alone. Now, sir, in relation to the minimum sentences, sir, we do know, and the Attorney General did speak about it, and he said that minimum sentences have been found to be unconstitutional in a number of jurisdictions. The Privy Council has found it, sir. I think the CCJ has found it as well. So although it is for us to prescribe what we believe a minimum sentence should be, we must, at all points in time, retain to the judge the discretion to vary from that sentence. And we wrapped it up. Certain examples are given as to what should be taken into consideration if the offender was below 18 or whatnot. But also, sir, the judge has the criteria of exceptional circumstances. The law can't provide for every circumstance. And judges know what exceptional means. It's a legal term, it's a term in common English. If there is a circumstance in front of the court that the court cannot ignore, then the court has the discretion to take that into account in prescribing. The other things, sir, under that particular section, where for the initial charge or the initial offense, the penalty is between 10 and 20 years. There's also a provision there for a fine of $100,000. So if, sir, the judge decides to not give you the harshest possible sentence, so on your first offense, they decide to not convict you with 20 years or not sentence you to 20 years, the judge still has the option, sir, to give you the 10 years, but tack on a $100,000 fine on there, which is usually an alternative fine for further 10 years or something. So we are making sure that even when leniency is exercised in terms of time to be sentenced, that there's still a monetary component, that you may not get the years, but you will get years plus money, which if you don't pay, yields other years. I hope I'm making myself very, very clear. I'm looking at some who are laypersons inside, sir, and I'm gauging by the nodding that it has been clarified. Now, sir, the other provision that is made in this amendment is for the creation of 2 other categories of licenses. As it stands now, sir, the license regime consists of a have, use, and carry permit. There's only one license that is prescribed under our laws as a have, use, and carry permit. So everybody who applies for firearm, technically speaking, has to satisfy the exact same criteria for have, use, and carry. Now, sport shooting is a big thing in Barbados, sir. A very big thing in Barbados. And those who wish to shoot for sport, an anomalous situation, sir, was created where the police took it upon themselves some years ago to use a stamp, a rubber stamp saying for sporting purposes. So because there was no separate license for sport shooting, you applied in the normal scheme of things, and everybody understood that this person intended to shoot for sport, and a rubber stamp was put on it, on the normal license saying for sport shooting purposes only. Now, sir, that had no real basis in the law. And what happened a couple years ago, sir, was that somebody challenged it. And they challenged it on the basis that that license or that stamp had no validity. And although they obtained a license understood for the purpose of sport shooting, that they should be entitled to have ammunition with that, and they can carry it. And the court had to uphold it because it didn't exist in the law. Now, another situation was created, sir, because of persons who shoot for sport or who shoot competitively. All guns are not the same. All firearms are not the same. I don't know, sir, if you ever had a chance to go and watch a competitive shooting event. Sir, it's like the difference between a Minimo and a Ferrari. Half the time, the guns that you see on television or you see persons with, or you see that the police have held when they publish those guns in the newspaper, a sport shooting firearm, sir, shaped differently. It has things sticking off to rest your thumb on, optic sights, other things for speed. And you could not, it's not a firearm that you can easily carry on your person. If you had a sport shooting firearm, sir, fully tricked out, I could not conceal that on my person without everybody knowing that it has something. It would be sticking out all over the place. So it is not apples and apples. Apples and oranges, sir. We have an active shooting fraternity in Barbados, sir. I think the discipline that we have most been often represented internationally at the Olympics, I believe, has been in shooting. Michael Maskell, sir, was a shotgun shooter, clear target shooter, and he was in the Olympics, I believe, since 1980. We have had a number of people shoot competitively in trap and skeet, and right now in Barbados, sir, at one of the facilities, I don't want to call the particular names of facilities, they now have Olympic standard design facilities for both trap shooting and skeet shooting, because we are trying to develop shooting as a sport and get more persons into the World Championships and into the Olympics. And right now, shortly to leave, sir, Barbados is fielding a full team at the CAC Games shortly in both trap and skeet. We also constantly see in the newspapers, sir, this team is coming back from competing at the World Handgun Championships or you see the Barbadians with medals on. We don't tend to publicize it. I think it might be a decision on the part of the press, but we don't tend to publicize the accolades of those who shoot competitively for Barbados, sir, but they are serious and there are many. Now, sir, I had asked your permission to call some names and make some references because I wanted to prove a point, sir. Now, as I said, sir, Michael Maskell has been shooting at Olympics since 1980s. We've been sending shooting teams to the World Handgun competition since 2014, and we're now fielding full teams in the production and standard divisions. Barbados teams have been on the podium in regional events in Grenada, Trinidad, Aruba, Suriname, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Martinique. And we are sending a full track team and skeet shooters to the CSC Games in Peru this year. Sir, with the ISSF Federation, teams from the Barbados Rifle and Pistol Federation have medaled internationally in 22 rapid fire and air pistol, and they recently came back from Guatemala where the team won 2 quarter spots for the CSC Games. David Seal just won an air pistol gold in El Salvador. We have people competing internationally all the time, and certainly we have, I think, the best female shotgun shooter, trap shooter, or skeet shooter in the English-speaking Caribbean. So Barbados is on the map in shooting. But because, sir, we didn't have the regime for sporting licenses, it created situations, sir, like one of our shooters had gone overseas, and in these competitions, you win medals, but you also win equipment. And one of our shooters did exceptionally well in an overseas competition. I was given one of the most modern, up-to-date speed shooting firearms as a prize. He couldn't bring it back to Barbados because we had no provision for him to license it here. A number of years ago, sir, due to a challenge in the courts over multi-caliber firearms to sport shooting, an injunction was granted affecting the licensing of those firearms, sir, and for the last, I think, 10 plus years, those licenses have not been reviewed. So you have a situation, sir, where persons who held the licenses have not had to renew the licenses, but equally, no new licenses could actually have been granted either. So this has stymied and crippled the ability of our competitive shooters to shoot. So to remove that situation, which has been causing problems for over 10 years, it was thought fit, as we were amending the legislation now, to just deal with that because it was a problem and needed to be dealt with. In addition, sir, people ask about the hunting as well. There are monkey hunters, there are hunters in Barbados, sir, who are licensed by the Ministry of Agriculture, and they assist the farmers significantly. People who don't grow crops don't necessarily understand the reason that we have hunters in Barbados, sir, but the farmers understand very well. And one morning, sir, at the invitation of some of the persons who hunt in Barbados and who deal with the Ministry of Agriculture, I woke up the Minister of Agriculture early, about 5:30 in the morning, sir, and we went and collected him. We went out so that he could actually understand and we could get an appreciation at their invitation as to what is involved in hunting and culling pests and in particular monkeys. And as I said, so if we go back to understanding that there exists at present only one category of license, it then makes it difficult to control all the other considerations at play. So with respect to the sport shooting, sir, the intention is to create an environment where someone can be licensed, given a license to have a firearm for competition or sport shooting purposes, but have no ammunition attached to that license whatsoever. So for persons who want to shoot on a range and compete on a range, you can now get a license, or provision is there for you to get a license, but you cannot have any ammunition attached to that license. So it takes away the anomaly that was created in the court case, sir. Now, further and apart from that, the intention is that those persons who have those licenses, that they can only be have the firearm on them when they're taking the firearm from their place of residence to the registered club and coming back. And the intention is that even in transit, that firearm is supposed to be in a locked firearm safe or locked firearm box. There are boxes, sir, for the transport of firearms. So you cannot have that firearm on your person unlocked and you have no ammunition attached to it. It was interesting, sir, that the Attorney General consulted very, very widely with the shooting fraternities, with the BRPF, with the BRA, the Clear Target Shooting Association, and some of the dealers in Barbados. And rather than arguing for increased rights for the firearm holders, sir, for the sporting firearm holders, I think it was pretty much unanimous across the board that in order to preserve the integrity of competitive shooting, the hardest possible restrictions should be applied to the license and to the person having it. So if you have a shooting firearm license, sir, and you find yourself in breach of the conditions of your license, i.e. transporting the gun, opening the car, then you are liable to some of the same penalties that occur here. If you are found with ammunition, because if you have the sporting license and you're found with ammunition, the penalty for you is the same as somebody who has no license at all, who has ammunition in their possession. So it allows the person, the sporting person, to have their firearm, to be able to deal with it at home, to machine it, to make improvements to it, to dry fire with it. But you have no rights over and above the ordinary citizen who has no license to have any ammunition in your possession. So it removes that argument that people say that people who have sporting firearms may use the firearms in commission of offenses or least amount. If you do or you possess ammunition, sir, you're going to be in as much trouble as Joe Blow on the block who has no license at all. Now, why the separation of sporting firearms, sir, and hunting licenses? In St. Lucia and some other territories, sir, the two of them run together, so there's a sporting and hunting license. We took the liberty of separating it in this amendment, or creating a separate regime, because hunting necessarily involves firing. A person going to hunt or cull monkeys, when they leave where they're going, they're heading to where the monkeys are, where they're reported to be, where the farmers have called them to come to. So they obviously have to travel with ammunition and be in a position to use the firearm at a place other than a range. So the hunting licenses must necessarily attract some ammunition accommodation. So we thought it necessary to separate them because, well, you have to allocate some ammunition for the purpose of hunting. There is no requirement to issue ammunition for a sporting license because all the places you're going to use that firearm, sir, sell ammunition. And there are very strict requirements in dealing with the ammunition at the ranges, sir. If you get a box of ammunition, you have to sign for the box. You have to use all, or what you don't use has to be returned, and you have to sign for those that you have returned. And in some of the clubs, sir, I believe in most of the clubs, they actually do spot checking. So they do random searches of persons leaving. I could be a registered member in good standing, well respected. And on leaving the club, they will randomly pick me and say, open your bag. And check to make sure you're not taking anything from the range that you otherwise should have. So I just want people to understand, and I need the public to understand, sir, that although now you see the creation of a hunting and a sporting license, this is not actually creating a new regime technically. It is cleaning up a messy situation caused by trying to administer different regimes under one category of firearm license as existed before. So as I said previously, sir, it was only a have, use, and carry, but the have, use, and carry purported to govern sport shooting, and it purported to govern hunting as well. And that created situations where sometimes people got rights that the police did not necessarily want them to have, or it wasn't intended that they have for the category or the purpose for which they carry the firearm. So, I believe, sir, that captures the bulk of what it was that I was trying to clear up. I just wish to commend the Attorney General, sir, and the government and the police force for the work that has been done in trying to bring what is a clear and present danger to our society, sir, under control. People often ask, why is more not being done? Sir, the reality is, if I pick up one morning and decide, having not conferred with anybody, that I'm going to shoot somebody, I decide in my head that I'm going to shoot John Brown. Sir, there is pretty much nothing that can be done by anybody to predict that. What has to happen is that the police have to try to catch me after I've done it. And this is where information comes in. We keep making the point, sir, that there's a whole of Barbados approach, that this is something that we require all of Barbados to be involved in. Every time you harbor a criminal, or every time you fail to disclose information that may lead to the capture of somebody who has committed an offense, sir, you actually put yourself in danger. If you are living in a house next to somebody you know is dealing in firearms or dealing in illegal drugs, then the person that comes for them might miss them and shoot you or shoot your child. So it is for us to understand that we all have to play our part in bringing these scourges under control. The government has now done its part. We have shown our seriousness, sir, with the increased penalties, with the increased capacity in the court, with the innovations in the amendment bill in terms of consecutive sentencing, the sentencing plus the fine, and mandatory minimums except in exceptional circumstances. The government has shown its intention to have a zero tolerance approach now to the use of firearms. It could not be any more clearly stated. The government has now done its part with respect to the legislative framework in trying to bring this under control. It is now time for the rest of Barbados, sir, to actually step up and let us play our part as well. Let us play our part. If we see something, say something. If you know something, tell someone. At the end of the day, sir, by giving up a piece of information, the life you eventually save might be your own. Now, sir, unless I can assist any further, I hope that I have served in some way to clarify, set a context, and to explain some of the intricacies of the legislation in a way that people can understand. And having said that, sir, all that's left for me to say is that I fully support the amendments to this piece of legislation. Thank you, sir.
Honourable Member St. James Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I think that this would be an appropriate time for us to move the suspension of the House until 2:35.
Question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:35 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against it, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:35 p.m.